He called me invisible. He said it with a smile, raising his glass in front of 250 people who had come to celebrate my son's greatest achievement. He looked right at me and said, "To the people who actually made this possible." And then he turned his back. My son's father-in-law. A man who had never worked an honest day in his life. A man who thought money could rewrite history. His face went white when I stood up, because he had no idea who I was. And by the end of that night, everyone in that room did. My name is Dorothy. I am 63 years old. I live in a small house in Clover Creek, Tennessee. The same house where I raised my son Marcus, on a nurse's salary and sheer stubbornness. I have calluses on my hands from 31 years of 12-hour shifts. I have a scar on my left wrist from the night I fell running to my car in the hospital parking lot because I didn't want to be late picking Marcus up from his after-school program. I was never late, not once. Marcus's father left when Marcus was 4. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting, no broken dishes. He just stopped coming home. One Tuesday in March, he was there, and by Friday, he was not. And the note he left on the kitchen counter said he needed to find himself. I remember standing at that counter for a long time, holding that piece of paper, and then I folded it very carefully, put it in the kitchen drawer, and I made Marcus his breakfast. Scrambled eggs, the way he liked them, with a little bit of cheese. I did not have the luxury of falling apart. We were not poor, but we were careful. I packed Marcus's lunches every single day until he graduated high school. I bought his clothes at the end of season sales. I drove a car with 200,000 miles on it because the payment on a new one would have meant canceling Marcus's piano lessons, and I had seen the way his face changed when he sat at the piano, like he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere better. I worked nights when I had to. I worked holidays. I worked the week after my mother died because I had already used my bereavement days earlier that year when my aunt passed, and I could not afford to take unpaid leave. I sat in the hospital break room and I cried for exactly 12 minutes, and then I washed my face and I went back out to my patients. They needed me, and Marcus needed the health insurance. What I am telling you is not a story about suffering. I want to be clear about that. It is a story about knowing exactly what you did and why you did it, and refusing to let anyone take that away from you. Marcus was a quiet child who became a serious young man. He read everything. He asked questions that made his teachers uncomfortable. He won a full scholarship to the University of Tennessee when he was 17, and I sat in the auditorium at the announcement ceremony, and I did not cry until I got to the car. Then I cried for a long time, the good kind. He went into medicine. Of course he did. He had grown up watching me come home in scrubs, watching me study for my continuing certifications at the kitchen table after he went to bed, watching me talk to frightened patients on the phone and make them feel less afraid. He used to sit on the stairs and listen. I didn't know that until he told me years later. He met Cassandra in his second year of his residency. She was a hospital administrator, sharp and warm at the same time, the kind of person who remembered everyone's name and always meant it. I liked her immediately. I liked the way she looked at my son. Not like he was impressive, but like he was hers. Like she saw him. Her family was a different world. Her father, Gerald Whitmore, had made his money in commercial real estate. He was the kind of man who wore his watch on the outside of his shirt cuff so everyone could see it. He had opinions about wine and expressed them at length. He had never, as far as I could tell, been uncertain about anything. He had a wife named Patricia who laughed at everything he said slightly before it was funny. a practiced half-second ahead, like she was following a script she had memorized long ago. The first time I met them was at a dinner at their house in Brentwood. I wore my good blue dress. I brought a pie I had made from scratch, a bourbon peach pie from a recipe my mother gave me. Patricia took it from me at the door and said, "How sweet." And I never saw it again. It did not appear at dinner. I assume it went directly to their kitchen and then directly to their trash. Gerald asked me what I did. I told him I was a registered nurse, ICU, 31 years at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. He nodded in the way people nod when they are already thinking about their next sentence. He asked Marcus if he had decided on a specialty yet. He did not ask me another question for the rest of the evening. I drove home alone that night. Marcus had ridden with Cassandra. I sat in my car in my driveway for a while before going inside, and I thought about the pie. My mother's recipe. And I decided that Gerald Whitmore was a small man in an expensive house, and that small men sometimes got away with a great deal because no one ever made them stop. Marcus proposed to Cassandra the following spring. She said yes before he finished the sentence, apparently. He called me from the parking lot of the restaurant where he had done it, and he was laughing, and she was laughing in the background, and I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and felt something so full and heavy in my chest, I had to sit down. The wedding planning began immediately. Cassandra's family wanted a large wedding. Gerald, specifically, wanted a large wedding. 300 guests. A venue outside Nashville. A converted estate with a long gravel driveway and white tents and string lights. Cassandra showed me photos on her phone, and she was careful and kind about it, asking what I thought, making sure I felt included. The Whitmore family was paying for most of it. That was simply the reality. I contributed what I could, which was real and meaningful to me and invisible to them. I paid for Marcus's suit and for the rehearsal dinner flowers and for the honeymoon travel insurance, which no one thinks to buy and which they ended up using when their flight was delayed 18 hours. I know what I contributed. There were early signs that Gerald did not consider me relevant to the proceedings. I was consulted on the seating chart, and then the seating chart was changed without telling me. My suggestion for a specific song during the ceremony was noted and then not used. These were small things. I told myself they were small things. 3 weeks before the wedding, I learned something that was not small. I have a friend named Ruth who has worked in Nashville's financial community for over 30 years. We went to nursing school together, and then she changed direction and went into accounting, and she has spent her career knowing where the bodies are buried, financially speaking. She calls me every Sunday. She had been calling me every Sunday since 1987. She called me on a Tuesday. "Dorothy," she said, "I need to tell you something about Gerald Whitmore." I sat down. What Ruth told me, carefully and with dates and documentation she later sent to my email, was this. Gerald Whitmore had built part of his real estate portfolio in the early 1990s using investors he had solicited from working-class communities in Nashville. He had promised returns. He had taken their money. He had restructured his companies in a way that was technically legal and completely devastating. And when those investments collapsed, the people who lost their savings had no recourse. Ordinary people, people like me. Some of them had been saving for years. Some of them had lost everything. One of the people on Ruth's list was a man named Charles Delaney, who had worked as a maintenance supervisor at a hospital in Murfreesboro. He had invested his retirement savings based on Gerald Whitmore's personal recommendation. He had lost it all in 1994. He died in 2011 without recovering financially. I recognized the name. I had known Charles Delaney. Not well, but I had known him. He used to come up to the ICU to fix things, and he always knocked before he entered a patient's room, which not everyone did. He was a careful, courteous man. I had heard years ago that he had passed, and I had thought about him briefly, and then the current of daily life had carried me on. I sat with Ruth's email for 3 days. I read every document. I thought about Charles Delaney knocking before he entered a room. I thought about my son and Cassandra and the wedding in 3 weeks. I thought about what it meant to know something and to choose what to do with it. I want you to understand that I did not make this decision quickly or easily. I thought about Cassandra, who was innocent of all of it. I thought about Marcus, who loved her. I thought about the possibility that exposing Gerald Whitmore could fracture this family before it had properly formed. I thought about it for 3 days, barely sleeping. And in the end, I decided that the truth was not mine to suppress. That the people who had lost their money deserved to be known. That Charles Delaney deserved to be known. But I also decided on my timing. Because I had learned in 31 years of nursing that timing is everything. I did not go to Gerald. I did not threaten him. I sent Ruth's documentation, along with a letter I wrote very carefully over several drafts, to a journalist named Patricia Okafor at the Nashville Banner, who had spent years covering financial misconduct. I had read her work. She was meticulous. I sent it, and I waited. And I said nothing to anyone. The wedding was on a Saturday in October. The estate was beautiful. Cassandra was radiant in a way that went beyond the dress, beyond the flowers, beyond all the careful planning. She glowed. My son stood at the altar and watched her walk toward him, and his face did the thing I had seen it do at the piano when he was 9 years old. He was somewhere else entirely, somewhere better. I was seated at a table with Gerald's distant relatives and 2 of Cassandra's college friends. Not the front row, not near the family. A round table near the edge of the tent where the string lights were a little dimmer. I noticed. I straightened my dress and I smiled at the woman next to me and I asked her how she knew the bride. The reception was everything Gerald had designed it to be, which meant it was impressive and slightly exhausting. The food was extraordinary. The band was excellent. Gerald moved through the room like he owned it, which in most practical senses he did. Then came the toasts. Gerald took the microphone after Marcus's best man, who had been warm and funny and exactly right. Gerald was practiced. He knew how to hold a room. He spoke about Cassandra's childhood, her accomplishments, the family he had built. He spoke about Marcus with the careful generosity of a man who is accepting something he has decided to tolerate. And then he said it. "A wedding like this takes a village," he said. He smiled broadly. "It takes people with vision, with resources, with the ability to dream big." He raised his glass. "To the people who made this happen." He looked across the room. He looked at his wife. He looked at his colleagues, his friends, the people at the tables nearest to him. He did not look at me. The room raised their glasses. People cheered. Someone near me clinked my glass, and I clinked back, and I smiled. And I thought about Patricia Okafor, and I thought about Charles Delaney, and I thought about a Tuesday morning in 1994, when an ordinary man trusted the wrong person with the savings of his entire working life. I stood up. I don't know exactly what people expected when they saw a 63-year-old woman in a blue dress rise from the table near the edge of the tent. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps they thought I was going to the restroom. But Marcus saw me. I know he saw me because he went very still. I said, "I'm sorry, Gerald. May I add something?" There was a moment. Gerald looked at me the way he always looked at me, processing me, categorizing me, finding me negligible. Then he smiled the smile of a man who believes he can afford to be gracious to negligible people. Of course, Dorothy, he said. Someone handed me a microphone. I think it was one of the catering staff. I remember her face was very calm. I want to thank everyone for being here, I said. My name is Dorothy Calloway. I am Marcus's mother. I raised him by myself in Clover Creek, Tennessee, for 23 years. I paused. I want to tell you one thing about my son. When he was 12 years old, he came downstairs at 11 o'clock at night and found me at the kitchen table trying to understand a medical billing error that was going to cost us money we didn't have. And he sat down next to me and he said, "Tell me what the problem is, Mom. I'll help you figure it out." He was 12 years old. I looked at Marcus. His eyes were bright. That is who you married, Cassandra. That is who he has always been. A person who sits down next to you when there is a problem and says, "I'm here. Let's figure it out together." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "Gerald, I want to ask you something. Do you know a man named Charles Delaney?" The tent was very quiet. Gerald's smile did not change immediately. It changed slowly, the way light changes right before a storm. A slight shift, a small wrongness, a dimming that happens before anyone consciously registers it. "I don't believe I do," he said. "He worked at Murfreesboro General for 22 years, I said. "He was a maintenance supervisor. He was a careful man. He knocked before he entered a patient's room." I reached into my small evening bag and removed a folded piece of paper. In 1993, he attended an investment seminar that you hosted at the Doubletree on Commerce Street. He invested his retirement savings based on your personal recommendation. I unfolded the paper. He lost everything in 1994. He never recovered. He passed in 2011. The room was absolutely silent. His is one of 47 names on a list that has been in the possession of a journalist at the Nashville Banner since last Tuesday, I said. The documentation has been reviewed and verified. I understand the story is scheduled to publish on Monday. Gerald Whitmore's face went through several changes in quick succession. I watched each one. The smile collapsed first, then the color, then the composure, which lasted a little longer than the other two, because composure was what he had practiced longest. I folded the paper back up. I set the microphone down on the table very carefully. "Congratulations, Marcus," I said. "Congratulations, Cassandra. I love you both very much." I sat down. The woman next to me, the one who had clinked my glass, reached over and put her hand on mine. She didn't say anything. She just held it there for a moment. The band started playing again. The room slowly, carefully began to breathe. Marcus came to me before the cake cutting. He crouched down beside my chair so we were eye level, the way he used to do when he was a little boy trying to tell me something important. "Mom," he said. "I know," I said. "You knew. You've known. For 3 weeks." He looked at me for a long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have had to choose," I said. "And it wasn't your choice to make. It was mine." He put his head down on my shoulder. This 6'1" man, this doctor, this person I had scrambled eggs for on a Friday morning when the world as I knew it had just ended. He put his head on my shoulder and I put my hand on his hair and we sat like that for a little while, with the music playing and the string lights glowing and 250 people talking quietly around us. Cassandra came 20 minutes later. I was ready to apologize to her. I was ready to say that I had tried to do the right thing and that I understood if she needed time. But she sat down across from me and she took my hands in hers and she looked at me with those clear, steady eyes and she said, He did it to my grandfather, too. My mother's father. I was 14 when I figured it out. I just never had proof. I looked at her. "Thank you," she said. "Dorothy." First time, she had used my name without the Ms. in front of it. I noticed. The story ran on Monday, as Patricia Okafor had said it would. It ran on the front page of the digital edition and was picked up by 2 national outlets by Tuesday afternoon. Gerald Whitmore released a statement through his attorney. Patricia Okafor wrote a follow-up. A civil attorney reached out to several of the families on the list. I don't know exactly how it ends. The truth is, I don't think about Gerald Whitmore very much. I think about Charles Delaney sometimes. I think about the 46 other names on that list. I hope they feel something when they read the story. I hope it is something close to being seen. Marcus and Cassandra came to Clover Creek for Thanksgiving, the first one after the wedding. She asked to help me cook. We stood in my kitchen together, and she asked me questions about my recipes, and I showed her what I knew. And Marcus sat at the counter and watched us, and his face had that look again. That elsewhere look. That better place look. After dinner, when Marcus was watching football in the other room, Cassandra helped me with the dishes. We were quiet for a while, comfortable in the way that takes time to build and is worth building. She said, "You know what he told me when he proposed?" "What's that?" He said, "I learned from watching my mother that you can do the right thing and it still costs you something. But you still do it, because that's who you are." I kept washing the dish in my hand. The water was warm. "That's who he is," I said. "That's who you made him," she said. Outside, the November evening had gone dark and still, and the lights in the kitchen made the window a mirror, and I could see the 2 of us reflected there, standing side by side at the sink. An ordinary scene. The kind no one photographs. The kind that is the whole story. I dried my hands on the dish towel my mother had given me, the blue one with the small white flowers, worn thin now from so many years of use. I thought about Gerald Whitmore raising his glass and looking past me like I was furniture. I thought about Charles Delaney knocking on a door before he entered. I thought about a 4-year-old boy eating scrambled eggs with cheese on a Friday morning, while his mother stood very still at the kitchen counter and decided not to fall apart. Some things take 30 years to settle. That doesn't mean they don't settle. I hung the dish towel back on its hook. I turned off the kitchen light. I went into the other room where my son was, and I sat down.